A routine checkup turned into a shocking discovery that changed Norah O'Donnell's life and forced her to face a scary truth. What was found below the surface would not only shock her, but it would also wake up millions of people. Few people saw this coming until Norah O'Donnell broke down in tears and told them about her terminal illness. The public face of news. The words were shown on TV, on news websites, and on social media sites, getting the attention of millions of people. The title this time wasn't about a scandal in politics, a crisis in another country, or something that was breaking news. It was about the bad news she had for O'Donnell. Norah O'Donnell was a model of great journalism for decades, always presenting hard-hitting news with confidence. People had always seen her as strong, whether she was talking to world leaders, reporting from war zones, or breaking down complicated problems for the public. Because of how poised and smart she always seemed, she became known as one of the most trusted figures in American media. She became a journalist because she was always wanting to find the truth. She was born into a military family and learned discipline, toughness, and a deep respect for honesty, all of which would later shape her work. She did very well in school, went to Georgetown University, and quickly became known for her work as a political reporter. People's trust in the media changed all the time, but O'Donnell was always there to give the information in a clear and accurate way. It was truly amazing how quickly she rose through the ranks of news. People in the United States got to know her through covering some of the most important events in history, such as presidential elections, global wars, economic crises, and national deaths. She often found herself right in the middle of history and saw it change before her eyes. She had been through the hardest places, from the war zones of Afghanistan to the halls of the White House. With her usual depth and intelligence, she brought stories to life, but no amount of experience could have made her ready for the news she was about to hear. She had been telling stories for years about people who were strong, medical advances, and the power of will. She was now in the middle of one, the stress behind the camera. For millions of watchers, Norah O'Donnell was the picture of calmness. She was poised, articulate, and unwavering as she told some of the worst news stories of the decade. As the host of CBS Evening News, she had built a reputation for being a great reporter. In a time when the truth seemed hard to find, people trusted her. But what people saw on TV wasn't the whole story. The pressure was always on behind the camera, away from the clean set and bright studio lights. Every morning started a long time before the sun rose. Even though the city was still dark, Norah was already awake and going through a huge stack of reports, notes, and briefs. She carefully read through breaking news stories and compared sources to make sure that every word she said on radio was based on facts that could not be argued with. Reading from a script wasn't her only job. She also had to understand, analyze, and ask questions. Her plan was tough. By noon, she had already been in 2 meetings in a row, planning coverage, tweaking lines, and working with reporters in different parts of the world to make sure everything ran smoothly. Every second mattered in a high-stakes field where being ahead of the news cycle or behind the times could depend on seconds. Her team trusted her to make decisions, but that trust came with a huge responsibility. Meetings for production turned into meetings for editing. Reporters sent in their latest news, and Norah had to keep up with the steady flow of live feeds and pre-recorded segments. Even small changes like a missing figure, a source that can't be trusted, or an unexpected global crisis could throw the whole broadcast into chaos at the last minute. The stress didn't go away when the cameras stopped rolling, though. Norah was always being watched, because she was one of the most well-known women in broadcast news. Every word she said was broken down. A single phrase that is put in the wrong place could cause a stir. The clothes she wore made the news. Was she too polite? Too laid back? Did she look friendly enough while still being in charge? She had to follow very strict rules, and there wasn't much room for error. There was no off switch in a field where decisions were made quickly and people had high standards. She still had work to do after the evening news was over. She got ready for the next day's stories, called sources late at night, and kept a close eye on how things were going with the stories. She and the world never stopped moving. She began to ignore herself at some point along the way. It had been so long since her last full checkup that she didn't remember. At first, it didn't seem important. She did feel good after all. Nice enough. A disciplined routine, daily exercise, and a healthy diet were all things she did. It was true that she had learned how to deal with stress and thrive in chaos, but even the most trained bodies have boundaries. I got my face checked once a year, and I saw my dermatologist, Dr. Elizabeth Hale, 2 years ago, she later remembered. I checked a few things at the time and everything was okay. It had been 2 years since her last checkup, and she finally realized it. There had been signs. They were small but constant. A dull headache that didn't go away like it usually does. She brushed off her tiredness as just part of the job. A little blurred vision, nothing major, just the kind of mental weariness that anyone in her situation would feel. And she didn't stop, but she kept going anyway. What she didn't know was that her body had been trying to tell her all along. Soon, she would have to face a truth she could not go away from: the woman who makes the news. Norah O'Donnell is known for her tough reporting, breaking news, and unwavering dedication to telling the truth. As the host of CBS Evening News, she has spent years covering the most important news in the world, from political upheavals to global crises. But there is a personal story behind the well-produced shows and well-organized reporting, one that didn't start in the glare of the press but in the comfort of a Texas home. She used to be just a girl from San Antonio, Texas, with big dreams before she became famous. She grew up in a close-knit military family that taught her to be very disciplined, strong, and to always put in her best effort. Because her dad was a military officer by trade, the family moved around a lot, showing Norah different cultures, points of view, and experiences when she was young, which would later shape her work as a journalist. But San Antonio was her home and where her goals began to take root. She was always eager to do things. Norah always pushed herself to do her best, whether it was in school, sports, or things outside of school. She did really well in school and did a lot of extracurricular activities like cheerleading, track running, and debates. Her confidence was clear and she had a lot of energy. She was naturally interested in the world and wanted to learn everything she could about it. These qualities would make her a great writer. She didn't worry about being in the sun though, like a lot of teens in the 1980s and 1990s. She grew up in Texas, where the sun shined almost all year. She spent many afternoons outside running, swimming, and just enjoying the golden heat. Sunscreen wasn't always important. It wasn't even a thought in the first place. People thought that tan skin showed that someone was healthy, beautiful, and full of life at the time. Magazines made tan skin look cool, and tanning beds became a big deal in pop culture. A lot of her friends did the same thing, and Norah did too. She would often spend hours in the sun without thinking about what would happen in the long run. Her attention changed as she got bigger. She fell in love with journalism and developed an unquenchable drive to do well. She got her education at Georgetown University, where she finished with a BA in philosophy, and then went on to get an MA in liberal studies. She got better at talking to people while she was at Georgetown, where she also learned about politics, foreign relations, and how the media is always changing. Her job went very well very quickly. As a staff writer for Roll Call, her first big job, she covered Congress and learned all the ins and outs of political news. Soon, she moved up the ranks and proved that she was a good writer who wasn't afraid to ask tough questions or look deep for the truth. She wrote about presidential elections, world wars, and some of the most important events in modern history. She worked hard and was good at what she did, which got her a job at NBC News as a White House reporter, and then to CBS News, where she became one of the most well-known and admired reporters in the country. But despite all of her work success, she had forgotten to take care of her own health. Because she was so driven in her job, she was used to working long hours, being under a lot of stress, and being put last a lot of the time. At first, the signs were small and easy to miss when you were busy with live broadcasts and meeting targets. After all, she had been a newscaster for years, writing about health crises, medical breakthroughs, and efforts to make people more aware of health issues. But she had never stopped to think about how weak she was, until she could not ignore it any longer. The sudden change. Norah O'Donnell had put off a regular skin checkup for more than 2 years. Like a lot of busy professionals, she put work, goals, and important obligations ahead of her own health. Not because they were careless, but because they thought there wasn't any urgency, no obvious signs or important issues. But when she finally made an appointment with Dr. Elizabeth Hale, a well-known and respected dermatologist, she didn't expect anything special. This assumption was about to be called into question. While the test was going on, Dr. Hale stopped to look at Norah's back. A moment of thought, a closer look. A comment that suggested something more than routine screening. "There are 2 places here that I'd like to look at more closely," Dr. Hale said in a professional way. Skin cancer tests are an important part of preventive healthcare that people often forget about. A lot of people think they are not at risk for cancer if they don't have any clear signs or a family history of it. Melanoma, on the other hand, is the most deadly type of skin cancer, and it can grow slowly and without any symptoms. In the case of Norah, the sample was done. Even though the process was quick, it had big effect. She was told that the findings would be ready after Thanksgiving. This was news that she took in mentally, but didn't dwell on. It hadn't yet hit them how bad things really were. Medical diagnoses often come out of the blue, interrupting normal times and having effects that change people's lives. That day for Norah O'Donnell was Thanksgiving. An email notification showed up on her phone while she was casually checking it during a family meeting a short time ago. This is from Dr. Elizabeth Hale. Subject, please call me right away. It was clear how important it was. Norah got up from the table and walked away to make the call. The other end's answer came right away. There was no doubt in Dr. Hale's tone. Dear Norah, the test results are in. You have cancer that is already there. Melanoma in situ is the first stage of melanoma, which is only on the skin's surface. At this point, the disease is very easy to treat, but the condition is still serious. Just hearing the word melanoma makes people scared because of how dangerous it can be if it's not found early. Dr. Hale went on to explain what would happen next. Surgical removal was suggested as the best way to stop the disease from spreading further. We caught it early, which is good news.